Yo, what's up? Now, today we are going to be talking about this particular pair right here, which is the Kiwi Ears Astral. Now, this thing retails for $299 and in my personal opinion, I feel like this thing is like the Kiwi Ears Septet's brother. There are some minute similar things objectively, but sonically they are definitely a contrast from one to the other, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But for now, let's get a few things out of the way. First of all, thank you to AudioMonsta for sending these my way so that I could give you guys an honest and concise review. Now, in terms of the unboxing experience, I personally always like Kiwi Ears' sleeve the most because it is simple, it is bold with the lettering, and I feel like it is delivering its message quite well and direct. Taking off the sleeve, a very simple Kiwi Ears logo embossed on the packaging. Unboxing this thing, you will have a foam cutout which nestles the two earpieces very well, showing you a very stealth faceplate design of the Astrals. And with the foam cutouts taken out, you will be presented with your very standard Kiwi Ears case right here. Opening it up, you will be getting a set of tips, which my friend personally said this thing kind of resembles something along the lines of Astral tips. I'm not a tip roller, but for people who tip roll, he said that this thing kind of resembles Astral from the texture itself. So take that as you will. And last but not least, you'll be getting the cable, which is quite a nice 4-core braided cable with an interchangeable balance and unbalanced termination. And now in terms of the design of this whole IEM, it is a resin based build with everything entirely made of resin with some nuances of metal. You have a metal nozzle, and on the back chamber you can see there is a vent that is also inlined with a metal tube for a very aesthetic and a very functional design as well. The faceplate is a mainly black background faceplate with the Kiwi Ears logo, as well as some very nice blue-green iridescent type of flakes. And in terms of the fit, everything just fits perfectly anatomically. I've worn this the longest for close to 3 hours playing Silksong, and I feel like there is no issue with it whatsoever. So with all that being said, this is my review on the sound quality part of the Astrals. First impressions of this is that it's definitely something along the lines of, if I take the Harman curve as the baseline, how can I kind of modify it to be something that's somewhat more attractive or more special? So this, I would personally say, it's kind of like a Harman inspired type of U-shaped tuning. Not very, but some hints of warm tonalities. Musical prowess, I would say, is quite up there, and it is quite balanced with its technicalities as well. And overall, I would say bass is the most prominent thing of this IEM because I think that is the most engaging experience overall. As always with my videos, starting off with the bass, I personally feel like the bass is quite playful and quite plentiful. Sub bass overall provides quite a good amount of weight that rumbles you, but for this sub bass specifically, it is less of a gritty type. It is more of a smoothen out type. Lower bass is on the more organic side, and I would say the overall gives you quite a more relaxed and laid back experience. Even if, let's say, some bass licks were to be fast, it still gives you quite a nice, relaxing and sort of groovy vibe rather than a very aggressive side. Mid bass overall, I would say, is probably the shortcoming of the lower region, where I feel like it's a little bit on the leaner end and might overall be overshadowed by lower and sub bass occasionally. And to put it simply, I feel like there's nothing in particular I want to call out for the mid bass being, oh, it's this, it's that. It's just, good. That's it. Nothing I want to highlight. But what I personally want to highlight is bass as a whole. The definition, the tone definition of all the bass is more on the darkish side, but quite good, quite resolving. Aided with very good dynamics and very good staging, I feel like this thing really captures the essence of what is a good pair of IEMs. Specifically, what is a good versatile IEM, which I'll talk about in the mid-range later. Now going over the vocals, because this is more of a U-shaped tuning, I feel like occasionally there might be some slight recessed positioning, but I feel like it does not hinder the experience of the vocalist when you are listening to it. Vocal timbre and tonality, I would personally say, is more on the clinical side with a very slight hint of warmness here and there. So with that being said, I think the best analogy I could say is, it probably feels like a very warm summer wedding, like you're attending a warm summer wedding. You feel formal, everything is clinical, but there's that very nice sunsetty vibe. And more than occasionally, very dependent on the mix though, vocals with higher pitches sometimes might have a more bigger tendency to be thin, but the more thin it gets, the more energetic it gets, and vice versa. The more body it gets, the more relaxing it is, rather than being very aggressive and energetic. And personally, I feel like it's negligible, but on very rare occasions, J-pop sometimes do get more on the sharper side, so very dependent on the mix. Now, instruments on the mid-range, I feel like it's quite clean, it is quite transparent, and overall, like the summer experience, like what I said just now. Spacious, slightly warm, airy. Musicality and technicalities are quite well balanced, where sometimes if I just want to notice some certain things, if I just want to personally turn on my brain and get engaged, the micro details will definitely just jump out, the overtones will definitely just jump out and keep me going. But if I want to stop, I just zone out, I just want to sleep, that's the good thing. It will just jump back and it will just blend very well together with the mix, so you won't really get any sort of fatigue or any sort of forced engagement. Some other things that I want to highlight is that among all of the instruments that I've personally listened to, strings are the most engaging and the most organic. So it has the best amount of complexity, it sounds quite lively. So specifically for people who listen to acoustic sets with acoustic guitars, that will be your best bet for a very immersive experience and a very musical one as well. And resolution, in my opinion, is also very quite nice, regardless of whatever DACs that I'm using, or even if I'm directly plugging the Astral to my Mac with the unbalanced. Everything just sounds very clear, everything just sounds very well detailed. Also probably a very good way to say that it synergizes very well with the source. Now moving on with the upper mids and treble, best two words that I could describe is they are transparent and they are uncolored. Even though I did say that this set has some orange tinge to it, it does not touch anything from the upper mids and treble. For jazz, soul, R&B, funk, all of those percussions, all the cymbals, rides, hi-hats will definitely give you a more dry-ish bite, so you could feel like it's a little bit more engaging if you want to. But it is, in a way, slightly smoother now, so that you won't feel like it's fatiguing to listen to, and you can sleep with it. Ambiances in this range will definitely give you an even more airy and even more luscious experience as compared to the mid-range, so that is a very good plus. And similar to the percussions, instruments in this area overall will definitely give you some very good overtones that are quick, that are very decisive and very assertive with its presentation, but not extremely engaging. Just enough to add to everything, but not too much to make you forcefully being engaged. Now, moving on with the technicalities, I personally would say that for dynamics, it is very use case dependent as well as being very subjective. Me, I feel like what I notice the most when I'm using this to sleep is when you turn it down to very low volumes. Bass, more than not, will definitely overshadow the mids and, basically just bleed through the mids, because the mids, for some reason, I feel like they just lower down the volume a little bit too much on lower volumes. But on normal volumes, everything sounds alright. So again, very case use dependent. Lower volumes might have some inconsistencies on the volume difference, but for normal use case, everything sounds good. Now moving on to staging, which I personally feel like is one of the most important factors of a good IEM set, is that if you have a very well executed staging, your IEMs will sound amazing. And this pair definitely sounds amazing just by staging itself. You could definitely appreciate the level of musicality that it brings, because the amount of depth, the amount of separation, and the amount of accurate pinpoint imaging that you can get from the set is phenomenal. Disregarding the fact that I'm using the Kensei, even if I'm using my HibiDAP, even if I'm just directly plugging it into my Mac, you could feel like this is quite a spacious pair where the bongos of a certain song is just so far reaching to the very ends, where there's no decay, no loss of resolution, nothing. It just feels like it's very far reaching there, if it makes any sense. I'll compare this with the septet later, so moving on finally to detail retrieval, which again I feel like it's quite a very strong point of this pair, because the way that this thing handles macro details and micro details, more specifically on micro, is that it just pushes it enough. It pushes everything out in a very nice, intimate manner where it does not overwhelm you, and you can switch your brain on and off to feel like you want to engage with it or you don't want to. You can pilot this thing all by yourself just by saying I want to get engaged or not. Now, in terms of comparisons, two particular IEMs come to mind. First of all, the septet, which is the obvious brother to this. Also a 7-driver set, but that is a quad Brit. This is a hybrid. Regardless of how many types of drivers there is, how do these two execute themselves and compare with each other? This pair, overall, I would say Musicality is more on the prominent side compared to the Septet. Septet is overall more analytical in terms of its experience, but maybe pseudo-analytical because that thing is more treble focused, this thing is more bass focused. Objectively ignoring Musicality, talking about technicals, I would say this thing is more of a refined and a more smoothened out type of analyticalness. Septet is more aggressive, more sparkly, more bright. But honestly, regardless of the $30 price difference, these two definitely performs well in each of its own category, shining in treble and bass respectively. So it all comes down to preference. I would say these two are a tie. And the second thing that I want to compare this to is the Odyssey 2. Now, the Odyssey 2, I described it as the most correct sounding IEM ever. Now, I would personally say that this is probably a variation of this. So if you want something that is more correct sounding and you really do not want to risk the fact that you might not like it, get the Odyssey 2. But personally, I feel like with that amount of safeness comes with a caveat of being, too boring. So that is why I feel like with that out of the way, this would be a more interesting pick for people who wish to have a little bit more flavor. So for people who enjoy the Odyssey 2 on first impressions, they haven't pulled the trigger yet, and they feel like they just want a little bit more bass, but everything else more or less the same in terms of musicality, in terms of tech, you can definitely try this. Although there is going to be some obvious differences, I would say it's almost 80% similar, disregarding the bass. Now, with everything aside, what are my final thoughts on this particular pair right here? Personally, I feel like this is really a versatile IEM, like I said early on in the video. Mainly because no matter what genre I throw at it, from experimental Japanese electronic music to fast jazz to soul to R&B, everything just works perfectly. Like there is going to be a sufficient level of resolution so that everything could still be quite engaging. Again, if I want to. If I don't want to, I'll just switch my brain off and just lie on the couch and everything still blends in perfectly. This pair in particular, let me just walk you back a little bit. Even though, like I said, this sounds the most correct, the micro details are still engaging even if I turn my brain off compared to this one. So consider this a very well articulated and well executed IEM, and it's very balanced in terms of its technical prowess to musicality. And with that being said, thank you for watching this video. More to come. See you on the next one. Have a good day.